Hi guys, it's Circle M. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're going to look at shooting down small drones. If you've been paying any attention to the conflict over in Ukraine, I'm sure that you've been able to see just how effective these small drones are, whether it's for search and surveillance or for direct action against personnel and vehicles. So we're going to look at defending ourselves from that, but we don't necessarily have some of the more sophisticated electronic warfare equipment that someone else might have. We're just going to look at stuff that we probably have laying around the house with 12-gauge shotguns. We're going to use a couple of different types of ammunition. This is just the stuff I was able to pick up at my local sporting goods store. These obviously are not very high-budget YouTube films. I've never made a penny off YouTube, and it's probably never going to happen, so I just went with what I could find. We have 7.5 shot, 6.5 shot, 5 and 2. These are different, that these are 3-inch shells, whether these are the regular 2 3/4 shells. I think that the more dense pattern is going to play a bigger factor in the effectiveness rather than the actual length of the shell, but we're just going to have to see. The targets that we're going to be shooting at today, I've made a whole bunch of these cardboard targets with the outline of the drone on it. We are going to be shooting at a more extreme range to see what effect that we can have and the pattern that we're going to be able to create. I'm aware that other channels have done anti-drone stuff, but I'm going to try to make this as scientific and definitive as possible. So by the time you're done watching the video, you can actually tell, yes, I have a reasonable chance of using this against a drone. The body of a drone is relatively durable for what it is. So just because we can put a shell on the cardboard at a certain distance does not necessarily mean it'll damage or take down that drone, which is why these are going to be two-part targets. I have a whole bunch of aluminum cans. I believe that the durability of the single side of an aluminum can is going to be roughly equivalent to the strength of the propeller and propeller mechanism that's on these drones. So we can know if at a certain range we penetrate that aluminum can, it probably has a decent chance of doing damage to the way that the drone actually flies and successfully shooting it down. The shotguns that we're going to use today have two different barrel lengths. This is actually the first shotgun I ever purchased, and when I cut the barrel down, one thing I did not realize was that when shotgun manufacturers make barrels, there's actually more metal at the end of the barrel. It's thicker than it is in the other parts of the barrel, so they have enough room to actually cut the threads to put the chokes in. I didn't know that. I'm not a shotgun guy, right? So when I cut this barrel down, unfortunately, when I went to go thread it to actually put the chokes in here, there was not enough metal to be able to do it. So this shotgun is stuck at a cylinder bore, which is something to keep in mind if you ever plan to cut the barrel of your shotgun. That unfortunately does have a pretty big effect on the shot of the size of the pattern as it goes down range, but it's all a trade-off. I wanted a more compact, portable CQB type shotgun, and as a result, I ended up losing a little bit of the range. The second shotgun we have is full length with the threaded chokes in the end. We're going to use two chokes. We're going to have the cylinder bore and the full choke. I don't think it takes a genius to realize that the long barrel full choke shotgun is going to have the best effect at our targets down range. But I don't know. It may turn out that this short cylinder bore shotgun is adequate. Maybe not ideal, but adequate for what we're trying to do. Okay, we're out here at 100 yards. I have the cardboard with the can taped up on a larger steel target. That way, when we see the pattern spread beyond it, we'll still probably get some hits on that steel. We're starting at 100 yards because I think that's too far. So I know some of the drones fly higher than that, some of them fly lower than that, but we're trying to set the maximum that you can be effective. So we're going to do the number 2 shot first. Here's a hit right there. There's one right here. One did actually land near the rotor of where the prop would be. There's a couple of more hits here. There's a couple on the steel. But even with that turkey choke, full out, full distance, I don't think that's good enough. So we're still at 100 yards. I want to try this 7.5 shot to see if maybe, because there's more BBs, even though they're smaller, we still might up our probability of getting a good hit on the target. We got a couple of stray hits up at the top. Otherwise, not really much improvement, which is kind of what I expected. We're at 70 yards. Same target with the old hits marked off because there weren't that many of them. I'm back to the number 2 shot with a 3-inch shell. You can see this looks a lot more promising. There are more hits everywhere, including one that did connect with the can and did penetrate it. So I do think that if you did connect with the prop on the drone, it would successfully break it. The catch is, if you look at our 2-scale traced drone, none of those hits did actually strike a prop. We're still here at 70. Now we're going to move over to the 7.5 shot. You can see we actually did score more hits in total, including a couple more that are on the cardboard. Again, I don't think any of these necessarily would have been incapacitating due to the spread. Maybe with this tighter pattern, if you got lucky and got that over a rotor, you could have hit something, but it's hard to say, and none of those hits actually struck the can, so we won't know the penetrating power of that. All right, so we moved up to 60 yards. Same target, painted, taped up, all the good stuff. We're going to use the number 2. I think we're getting much better probability here. It's not spreading out quite so much. We did add 2 new hits to the can, both of which penetrated no problem. So I feel actually a lot better about the number 2 at 60. So 180 feet is probably going to be your limit. Of course, you're going to have to get it to connect, but this pattern density is starting to look better. Same distance, we're at 60 yards, 180 feet. Let's try it with the 7.5. You can see that now the shot density is a lot greater over the target. We did successfully connect with the can for one of those hits, and it did penetrate it. So if you did connect with a rotor, I feel pretty confident that you would damage it at this range. Of course, you can see the couple of hits that we landed. It's still not a super inspiring group. Now we're at 50 yards. I've got the number 2 shot again with the full-length gun with the full choke. I think that 60 yards is going to be your lucky. That's going to be your upper end of your effective range. If you get a hit, you'll take it down, but the shot pattern is getting pretty big at that point. So now from 50 and up, we're going to find where you can reliably engage that drone and probably take it out. This is looking a lot more promising. This is the number 2 shot. You can see that the density is getting better. That, of course, is a clean target. We did score a couple of hits, although none of them are on the rotors. 7.5 at 50. I haven't been painting over the hits on the steel because at this point there's so many of them, I'm just wasting paint. But if we look at the cardboard for the hits that aren't marked off, I think that you're starting to have a much greater possibility of successfully connecting with a rotor here. Here we are at 45 yards with the number 2 shot. I'm a lot more comfortable with the number 2 taking it out from a body hit, and we've now seen a couple that may have struck the rotors depending on where they are. So 45 with number 2 is probably good. 7.5, 45 yards. I think that 7.5 is going to be our winner. We have the most so far hits that look like they would have connected with one of the props, as well as a couple of body hits that could have been disabling. We're back at 60, since that seemed to be kind of the upper limit where you might get a lucky hit sort of reliably. Now we're going to do a little bit of volume shooting. I have 3 of the number 2 shells. We're going to shoot at this distance and see if we can get something that would be a successful hit. You can see that this now has, I think, a greater probability of actually taking that drone out. We've got several body hits. We have a couple that could have been rotors. So I think the number 2 might be a little bit better if you can shoot enough volume of it, because I think the number 2 is going to be strong enough to destroy a drone from a body hit. And if you put enough rounds down range, you might get that hit that you're needing. Now we're going to do 3 of the number 5 at 60 yards. You can see we've got pretty decent density with several body hits. We've got 3 of the 6.5. It's interesting to me that this one actually appeared to be slightly worse to 1 degree, but it did have a pretty good concentration around that rotor, so that may have been a successful kill. We're going to do 3 of the 7.5 at 60 yards. Here are the 3 rounds of the 7.5. The density is okay. All right, so now we got the short boy at 60 yards. Based on how the long shotgun did, I did this video differently than the way I was planning when I was talking about it. So we're going to shoot this one at 60. I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go. And then we're going to end up scooting up until we find the effective range of this guy. I don't think the limiting factor is as much the barrel as it is the fact that it just doesn't have a choke. So I will confess, I wasn't actually expecting a single pellet to actually hit the target. So you color me surprised that there are actually a few hits that did successfully land on the target at this range, but those are not what I would consider good, reliable hits. We scooted up to 45. I've shot this gun enough to know that that's probably what this gun is capable of. It's funny because that actually isn't that much better. We've got a few more hits, but there's still not a lot on that paper. Now it's 40 yards with the 7.5. It's interesting that this isn't actually showing that much of a measurable improvement by moving up. We still got a few hits. Some of them could have been a rotor, but I have to say you really need a choke in your shotgun if you're going to be trying this. Still at 40. Let's try 3 of the number 2s. You can see we got a couple of hits. Still, it's not fantastic. It's obviously worse than that 7.5 because there's just not as many of them. However, these are probably good body hits, so you may need to have the number 2 in order to get a kill if you are using a gun that short. Those are some very interesting results, and hopefully this was very helpful to you in planning what you might need or want in an anti-drone operation. The shot size that you select is important, and maybe here we'll do another video where I get some different size shots that are a little bit bigger, maybe in the T or B range, to see if that will have a different effect on these targets at this extended range. I do really think that shotguns are going to make a comeback in the standard loadout for a squad or a team. You'll have your guys with your rifles, you may have a guy with like a designated marksman or a sniper rifle, and I think that it's going to come back into vogue where you're going to have dedicated people whose job is to run the shotgun. They're excellent for anti-personnel, but with the proliferation of these small drones, I think that they're going to come back to play a much bigger role, that you might be carrying loads specifically designed for shooting down drones here in the near future. So, all in all, I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.